Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. My name is Quinn, and today I have the distinct pleasure of making a quick start guide of sorts for Dark Souls 3. This is going to be directed towards people who've maybe never played a Souls game before, or anybody new to the third installment specifically. Maybe you've had your hands full with other games, or maybe the series' widely acclaimed difficulty has made you hesitant to dip your toes into the beautifully despondent world of the Souls series. To that effect, I can tell you right now that the game can be challenging, of course, but very rarely is this frustrating. The difficulty of these games isn't measured by the hit points or damage that either you or your enemies possess, but much more so by how well you can adapt to the combat system and its subtleties. Dark Souls 3, more so than any of the others, provides an immense amount of freedom concerning a player's decisions on how to shape and build their character, allowing for some stark contrast between playstyles and how you will interact with the enemies around you. A quick Google search or a visit to the subreddit will provide a metric fuck ton of information on the game's incredibly varied builds and mechanics, a defining strength of the game's characteristics, but one which can also be just as intimidating as the game's reputation. And that, good sirs, is exactly where this video fits in. It is neither a let's play nor a walkthrough, it is a tool you may use to get a solid footing in Lothric, and can build upon over the course of your playthrough. There really are an essentially endless number of builds and weapons you can work towards that vary in availability and complexity, and with no advanced knowledge on what you're going to stumble across throughout the game, all of these builds and guides become a confused, tangled mess of information that isn't useful to a new player. So what we're going to do is define a simple, solid approach that will give you the power to move through the world and augment later based on the preferences you develop. At no place during the game will there be a point of no return where you are unable to change your build, so just being able to jump into the game with something that you understand is incredibly important starting out. During this video, I'll explain mechanics and concepts you'll need to understand and where to find important early items we will be using in the build. As new things come up, we will take a brief pause so that I can give you the rundown on how they apply to your build or the way that you play. We will talk about everything you need to know and where to find notable items that you'll want to have, while leaving out anything super advanced, mechanics-wise, or exclusive to other builds. Okay, I am super excited to get started, so let's do just that. We are going to choose the Knight as our starting class and take a fire gem as our burial gift for a number of reasons. One of the most apparent benefits of the Knight is the gear it starts the game with. It will be a hot minute before we see armor that comes anywhere near being as good as our starting armor, especially our shield and our longsword. Once we get into the game, I will explain exactly why that is and why we want to take the fire gem as well. For now, just take note of our stats until I give them some more context. Take a couple minutes to make yourself beautiful. Fashion Souls is one of the most important parts of the game, as any experienced player will tell you. Maybe give yourself a nice evil look. Maybe a more barbaric take? Alright, close. Ha! Nailed it! Okay, now that we're in control, I want to talk about one of the most important distinctions in Dark Souls 3. Weapons in the Souls games are much more engaging than in others, and are made of much more than the stat numbers associated with them. Far more important is the weapon's moveset. Some are much better than others, and a massive benefit of the Knight class is its longsword, which offers one of the most practical movesets in the game. It isn't anything flashy, but it is very quick, and offers horizontal slashes and a thrusting poke that is insanely valuable and isn't very common on other weapons. Your moveset is made up of many things: standard, light, and heavy attacks, which are different for each of the game's weapons and change if you're running or holding the weapon with two hands. Take note that you can hold the heavy attack button to charge for extra damage and stagger, but should only do this if you're confident you have the time. Regarding your armor, it's better than average as well. Generally, the heavier the armor, the less damage you take when you're hit, but even better, it grants you more poise, which means you're less likely to be staggered out of your attack animation if you're hit during a fight, which is a very good thing. Lastly, your starting shield offers 100% physical resistance, which means blocking regular hits will only affect your stamina as long as you have it, and won't actually hurt you until your stamina is gone and you can't block any longer. Don't take this for granted. Many shields in the game are not 100% physical resistant, so especially for a new player, this is a godsend, and the Knight is the only starting class that offers a shield this strong. Alrighty then, if you run forward a bit to kill your very first enemy, you'll find the Ashen Estus flask sitting on the ground. While the typical flask refills a portion of your health, the Ashen variant will regenerate your focus points, which is signified by the blue bar underneath your health bar. This is the resource used for typical spellcasting and also for weapon arts, a new mechanic introduced in Dark Souls 3 and my favorite of the series editions. Every weapon in the game has a weapon art attached to it. Not all are unique to each weapon, but there are a great many of them. The longsword has a stance type art, which is activated by two-handing the weapon and holding L2. While active, it augments your light and heavy attacks, adding increased utility. Every time a weapon art is used, your FP will decrease by the cost signified on the weapon's stat sheet. There are a ton of weapon arts in the game, and while the longsword stance isn't flashy, it is very useful. Shields also have weapon arts, but typically only in a support fashion, such as your knight shield being able to parry. Another common one for shields is to allow you to use your weapons art while only using it in one hand. We will take a closer look at more later on in the playthrough. Okay, so right at the beginning, if you follow this path to the right, is an optional encounter with a ravenous crystal lizard that rewards a titanite scale you will use much later on to upgrade your weapon. These scales are incredibly scarce early on, so even though it'll be a while before you use it, it is great to have. You can 100% skip this and come back later if you'd like to, but I'm going to show you how to kill it now because it's a solid primer for what you can expect from combat. When you come across a new enemy type, it is often wise to slow roll it, so you can study its attacks. This guy has a lot of lunging sweep attacks, conal attacks, and AoE abilities. He does almost all physical damage, which is phenomenal for us because of our shield. However, anytime he generates crystals, they do split physical and magical damage, so even if you block the attack, some of the magic damage will slip through because our shield only has 51% magical resistance. A great strategy here is to rotate around him, holding your shield up in case he connects. But if you can cause him to miss and get an opening, you can get a few swings in before stepping back again. If you end up blocking an attack or two with your shield, make sure you don't keep holding it up when you don't need to, or your stamina won't regen quickly enough. If you don't have enough stamina to block an attack, you will be staggered and become vulnerable for exactly 1,000 lifetimes, and that's simply not what we want here. If you're able to get in enough damage in a short amount of time, you can stagger the beast. When this happens, you will have a very tiny window to get directly in front of him and hit R1 to perform a critical hit for substantial damage. New players will likely be killed several times attempting to kill the lizard, but fortunately it's a very short run back and there isn't anything to lose by having to retry, making this a fantastic opportunity to get more familiar with the controls. Eventually you'll kill the sapphire sucker and receive your prize. After you kill him, run back down the path and take a right up the cliff face to the first bonfire. As you probably have at least heard before, bonfires hold extreme importance in the Souls series. They act as forward checkpoints and travel nodes, refilling your health, focus points, and Estus Flask. This cuts both ways, however, because in addition, all enemies in the area will respawn, and you'll have to fight your way through to progress. Certain large or powerful enemies will not respawn, but these are rare, and one such example is the ravenous crystal lizard we just killed. Struggling and grasping your way through a new area, fighting against enemies you have never seen before, and then finding yourself without any more Estus, miles away from the last bonfire, praying you'll find one around the next turn is one of Dark Souls' most defining experiences. This, coupled with the Souls mechanic, is a large part of what makes Dark Souls so beloved among its fans. Surely you've noticed the soul counter in the bottom right corner of your screen that increases every time you kill something and reduces to 0 when you die. Souls are used for increasing your stats and for purchasing gear and upgrades. They are of vital importance. If you die, your souls will be left on the ground and you will have one opportunity to recover them. If you die before you get them back, they are gone for good. Eventually, there will come a time where you permanently lose a massive hoard of souls. It happens to every player, no matter how good they are. This is the mechanic that gives death significance in this series, which accents the difficulty of combat in a clever and lasting way. In my opinion, this is what makes every second of playing this game so incredibly rewarding, and will cause you to cycle through joy, anger, grief, pride, humiliation, and relief. Never slip into autopilot. Learn this lesson now and you will reap the rewards all throughout your playthrough. After lighting the bonfire and resting at it, clear the next area of its weak enemies before heading into the arena that reeks of trouble. Specifically, make sure that you make this jump onto the coffin in order to pick up a titanite shard, which we will use soon to upgrade your weapon. And also make sure you pick up the 5 firebombs down the path on the cliff face. They act as a sort of grenade and are very useful early on. Once you have these things, regain your health by resting at the bonfire, and then make a beeline for the arena. In the center, you'll see what appears to be a statue of a knight with a sword through his chest. To progress, you'll have to pull the sword out, and this will cause the knight to rise as the game's first boss. Immediately after removing the sword, take a step behind him and begin swinging. You can cause some damage before he's even ready to fight back. Once he is in form, step back and take stock of what his moveset and timings are. Be wary, however. He is capable of closing distance much faster than you may think. When you are somewhat familiar with his combos, you can get closer and attempt to do damage. Much like the crystal lizard before him, holding your shield up and rotating around him is the easiest way to cause him to miss you, allowing you to get in some more damage. Just when you think you have the fight figured out though, he'll tell you to fuck off by growing some extra limbs and a long snake head. You'll have a brief window during the transformation to swing a few times, but be prepared for an immediate AoE sweep when he is done. The transformation greatly increases his range and dramatically changes his combos. It's going to be much more difficult to stay safe while you figure out what his new moveset is. Your fighting style will stay much the same as before, but you're going to need to roll a lot more often than blocking because of the stamina consumption of his new combos. One option you do have here is to utilize the 5 fire bombs you picked up before the fight began. These are the only fire bombs you're going to get at this period, so when they're gone, they're gone. So I would only use them on an attempt where they will be what kills him if you're afraid to get closer. Udix Gundyr may look very scary and difficult to a new player, but you'll discover quickly that he isn't all that bad once you learn to evade his attacks reliably. He is a good opening fight for the game, but nowhere near as difficult as his compadres later on. Eventually he will fall, and the coiled sword will enter your inventory. We're going to use that in just a minute. You'll notice that after defeating Gundyr that a message will appear on screen saying Ember restored, and your health bar will be longer. Every time you defeat a boss or use the aptly named item Ember, you will become embered. You will gain a 30% bump to your health pool and will gain the ability to see other players' summoning signs and to summon them into your world. Like all good things in the game, this comes with a cost as well, as invading players are able to invade your game and kill you while you're embered. Once you die, either from a standard foe or an invader, your embered status will be lost and your health pool will return to normal. The PvP process is special in these games, and can become complicated when all of the game's PvP covenants are included. For now, the only real thing you need to know is that if you see another player in your game glowing red while you're embered, you need to be prepared for him to attack you. To further complicate this, NPC enemies in your world will not attack him, and he will often attempt to bait you into having to fight him and other enemies at once. If killed by an enemy player, you will drop your souls as normal, so be wary. You can always opt to turn online play off in the menus if you so desire, or just always play unembered until you decide you'd like to summon a friend or a random player for help, and simply use an ember where summon signs may normally appear, commonly in front of boss chambers or at bonfires. My 2 cents though is that I'd recommend leave the game as it is. Invaders can be frustrating, but often they add even more challenge and emergent fun to the game, and is just one more thing that makes the series so special. Go ahead and rest at the bonfire, and then run forth and open the double doors at the far side of the arena. Go through the door and run up the steps to the building at the top of the hill. This place is called Firelink Shrine, and acts as a hub area of sorts. Here is where your armorer, shopkeep, and NPCs will gather during the game, and also where you'll be able to spend your souls to level your stats. Make sure to exhaust all dialogue with NPCs here from time to time, as it frequently changes and many of the game's quests are progressed in this way. In the center of the shrine is a fire pit where you can place your coiled sword to light the Firelink bonfire. The woman standing next to it in gray robes is the firekeeper, who will allow you to trade in your souls for levels. Do not spend anything with her here yet, as I will go over the specifics of your build in just a moment. Just note where she is. The tunnel underneath the shrine's entrance is where you'll find the Shrine Maiden, who acts as a vendor of a host of support items, and later on for gear you can purchase. But more important is Andre the Blacksmith, hammering away at the end of the hall. Andre is responsible for upgrading your gear and weapons, and also for reinforcing your Estus flasks so that you may gain more charges. Speak with him now and you'll see the option to allot Estus, which you should take and give your 1 Ashen Estus charge back over to the regular type. We're not going to be taking advantage of sorcery, miracles, or pyromancy, and also would rather have more health regen than the ability to liberally utilize weapon arts. After your business is concluded with Andre, head back to the Firekeeper and let's discuss the build you'll be working with. If you take a look at the stats you see on your character sheet, you'll be able to see that you can split them between support stats and damage stats. Vigor increases your maximum health. Attunement increases the number of spells you can keep equipped and the amount of your focus points. Endurance increases your maximum stamina. Vitality increases your total equipped weight limit. This is important, we'll come back to it later. Which leaves strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and luck chock as your damage stats that will dictate your build in the most significant way. All the weapons in the game have required stats needed before you can wield them without penalty. For instance, your longsword requires 10 strength and 10 dexterity, while Fume's ultra greatsword requires 50 strength to be one-handed without penalty. Just because a weapon has a higher required stat limit does not make it inherently more powerful, just that it is intended for one build over the others. Because of this, the higher limit items typically have higher base damage, but the weapons with lighter stat requirements may have higher scaling or attack speed that washes this out. For the most part, all of the weapons in the game are equally viable, which is truly incredible. You can beat the game using any of them as long as you have the right build to partner with it. Let's take another, closer look at the longsword in your inventory. You can see that there are letters associated with certain stats. In this case, there is a D in both the dexterity and strength categories, and this signifies that the weapon gets D scaling from both strength and dexterity. This means that as your strength and dex stats increase, your damage with your longsword will increase alongside them. Scaling bonuses range from D at the lowest to C, B, A, and S at the highest. As you have Andre upgrade your weapons throughout the game, their scaling may change, and it may change again depending on the weapon's infusion type. For example, a fully upgraded refined plus 10 longsword will have BB scaling in strength and dex, which will generate far more damage from the same amount of strength and dex that your base unupgraded DD longsword will have. Most weapons in the game benefit greatly from a single stat with minor scaling in another, such as katanas that gain far more from dexterity than they do from strength, or a holy talisman that scales more from faith than intelligence. Typically, you'll see these weapons have something like AC or BD scaling when upgraded. Many popular builds focus on pumping a single offensive stat and then using weapons that gain the most from that stat. What we're going for, though, is an even distribution of strength and dexterity, and this is what is referred to as a quality build. The term quality stems from the first Dark Souls, so don't get hung up on that, but this is what is being referred to when you see the term quality mentioned online. Quality builds will allow you to use almost any melee weapon in the game without sacrificing on damage, and as such is a phenomenal build for beginners. I would argue it's probably the best choice for them. Your end goal for offensive stats is to have something like 40-40 for strength and dex. This will generally yield top tier damage while allowing you to still pump some support stats. We're going to be doing something special with our longsword though, so for right now I would suggest you pump your vigor and your endurance until they are about 20 and 18 respectively before putting points into strength or dexterity. Don't worry about whether or not you're going to mess up. Past a certain point relatively early in the game, you'll be able to respec up to 5 times for each playthrough, so you'll be able to redo stat allocation should you so choose. I know that this is a ton of really fast information, but bear with me just a bit longer. You don't need to have full comprehension of these mechanics, but you do need to at least start hearing about them while you flesh out your character. This is also a good opportunity to talk about weapon infusions and the fire gem that we chose as our burial gift when we created our character. Most standard weapons like our longsword do purely physical damage by default. There are an insane number of unique weapons in this game, and this doesn't hold true for all of them, but it does for most. Weapon infusions allow us to use different gems you find during your playthrough that will allow you to alter the natural damage properties of a given weapon. This is typically done because certain infusions have a certain type of affinity for certain builds, stripping away a weapon's base damage by a small amount to give it far stronger scaling potential with whatever damage stat you choose to increase. Certain gems, like our fire gem, remove the scaling potential altogether, but instead opt to split the damage output from pure physical to a mix of physical and fire, lightning, dark, holy, and so forth. This is beneficial in the early game when your chosen damage stat isn't high enough to offer any real value from scaling. Some even add bleeding or poison to weapons and are useful for certain builds but not for others. This is one way you can further control the way you build your character, giving you more weapon choices than what would naturally suit your build without these specialized infusions. I told you to take the fire gem as your burial gift because we're going to go back to Andre to infuse our longsword with it right now. Many early game enemies are weak to fire, taking bonus damage and staggering more easily. After you instruct Andre to infuse your weapon, you will notice the change on the item stat screen and will now see damage numbers in both the physical and fire damage categories. One downside to having a split damage weapon is that now your damage output will be subject to 2 rounds of enemies' resistances. So the physical damage will be reduced by an enemy's physical resistance, and the fire damage will do the same with their fire resistance. We're only going to be using the fire longsword for the next couple areas before either changing its infusion type or switching to a different weapon. But for now, these area's enemies have such a low fire resistance that this is by far more powerful than using the standard physical damage alone. Alright, now that we have the basic concepts of our build and weapons down, let's do a little house cleaning outside the shrine. First, if you used all your fire bombs fighting Gundyr, stop at the Shrine Maiden and buy a single firebomb from her. Go back out the way you came in and take a sharp right, and then another immediately afterward and kill the 2 sitting hollows on the stairwell. Grab the ember sitting on the ground and then keep going forward and look over the edge on the right side of the shrine. You'll see a skeleton dog down there, jump down and kill it, and then grab the ember here as well. I would hold on to embers until you need them. They aren't exactly rare, but also aren't abundant, so it's good to keep a stock of them in case you're ever getting your ass beat and need some help. I would always recommend new players struggle through their first playthrough alone though, just because of how rewarding it can be. Run back into Firelink and take an immediate right up the stairwell instead of jumping down. Go outside the upper level and run up to the locked gate. Behind you is a tree that is halfway fallen over. We're going to take advantage of this to gain early access to some important stuff. It'll take you a few tries, but run up the tree about halfway and then turn and jump onto the low roof right next to you. Run forward and then enter the top of the shrine through this open window, and walk across the rafters to pick up the very important Estus shard. You'll notice a voice talking to you when you walk through the feathers in the light. Pickle Pea and Pump-a-Rum are a unique sort of vendor that operate through trades for specific items. Go into your inventory and find your fire bombs, select one and choose to leave it on the ground, and then exit your inventory. The crows will spout some nonsense, but you can pick up the item on the ground to find it is now a large Titanite shard, which will be very useful later on when we upgrade your weapon. Now walk down the rafter directly across from the window and swing your sword at the wall here. It's an illusory wall that will vanish, allowing you to move forward until you can drop down this ledge here. To the right will be a chest you should open to find the covetous Silver Serpent ring, which you should equip immediately. As long as you're wearing it, you'll gain a 10% boost to the souls you receive from killing enemies. There are a ton of these illusions all throughout the game. Typically you'll see that players have left messages on the ground in front of them to help the new guys find them, but some are tucked really far out of the way and you're only going to find them through rigorous exploration. Go ahead and drop down and run back to Andre really quickly and choose to reinforce your Estus flask with the shard we just found in the rafters to permanently increase the number of uses by 1. We're done with this area, aside from one more optional endeavor that rewards a strong early game katana that doesn't fit our build very well, but you may like to collect it in case you decide to switch to a dex build later on. Outside to the left of the shrine is a set of stairs that leads to another locked tower. In front of this tower is an emaciated old swordmaster who is lightning quick and deceptively strong. You'll need to be very cautious here because you haven't fought anything quite like him yet. The katana he wields causes bleed, which will build up in a purple meter at the bottom of your screen as long as you take hits. Instead of dealing small damage over time, if the meter fills completely, you will take a massive amount of immediate damage, which will almost assuredly kill you if your health isn't already full. You'll probably die a few times figuring out the katana's weapon art, where he sheathes it and then dashes for big damage, but when you finally do get him down, you will receive the Uchi Katana and the Master's Attire armor set. A couple people have had some success trying to cheese him by getting him to dash off the edge or by pushing him off themselves, but I've never tried this. If he does fall off the edge, rest at the bonfire and then come back and his gear will be where he was initially standing. If you take a quick second to equip the katana, you'll see that next to your damage is a negative number. This is how much your damage is reduced by not having the required stats. It basically becomes unusable, and I just wanted to demonstrate this early on. Okay, that is it for this area. You'll continue on by going to the Firelink bonfire and using it to travel to the high walls of Lothric, which is the first real area of the game. The Cemetary of Ash and Firelink Shrine are basically a crash course to teach you basic game mechanics, and I know that we went over a ton of information in this video and that a lot of it was confusing. Dark Souls has a lot of unique mechanics, as well as new twists on old ones steeped in history all the way back to D&D. It's both perfectly reasonable and understandable that you may not fully grasp everything we went over concerning weapon statistics or how the game's builds function, but very soon you will. It is important that we at least were able to introduce a lot of these concepts so that they can lock into place later. High Walls of Lothric is up next and a very fun area, and while far bigger and more diverse than what we've gone through already, is still on the smaller side with a smattering of new enemy types and tons of new weapons and items to collect. many of which are effective options for your quality build. I'll start working immediately on a second installment to this Strong Start series so that you can focus on what you need and not spread yourself too thin with everything else. As I said earlier, Dark Souls is objectively one of the greatest series of all time, and I'm so excited to be able to help get new players introduced to it. You're going to love it. Of this, I'm absolutely certain. If this was either helpful or entertaining, please like and subscribe. It's a huge help. And comment below if you have any questions or thoughts. Take it easy till next time.